Terry Francona is serious about turning the Cincinnati Reds into a winner. And that means that there are two pitchers that may not be hearing their names on opening day because just how serious he is.
You are Locked On Reds, your daily Cincinnati Reds podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the Locked On Reds podcast. Locked On Reds is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name's Stephen Offenbaker. His name is Jeff Carr, and we love the Cincinnati Reds. We love baseball. We have been talking about these Cincinnati Reds in podcast form for a combined 14 years. We love talking Reds baseball with you. On today's show, we're going to examine the idea of JD Martinez possibly becoming a member of the Reds a little bit later on in this show. Spencer Steer is getting ready to throw again, and he might be able to avoid a designation that he has been able to avoid his entire career. We're going to tell you why in just a few minutes, but we are going to begin with some things we are hearing from Goodyear and why not one, but two pitchers we've been counting on that we all know well may not hear their names called on opening day. That's all coming up on today's episode that is brought to you by Monarch Money. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. All right, Jeff, we're hearing from some people close to the team that there's a disturbance in the force, as to use one of the things you like to say. There are a couple pitchers that you and I have both been counting as pretty much locks to make this roster that are, in fact, maybe on Terry Francona's naughty list. We are hearing that both Graham Ashcraft and Sam Mull came to camp not where they were expected to be. They were a little bit out of shape as far as being ready to go. And what we've seen from this team, Terry Francona is not messing around. And if these guys aren't ready, they may not make the roster.
Well, and this is all about the big picture, right? We're not just talking about in-game performances, although they feed into this a little bit. We're talking about everything behind the scenes, practice, all the other stuff that is leading into this. From what we have heard from the folks close to the team, the Reds really have this focus. At least Terry Francona wanted the Reds to have this focus this year, that what they have done in the past does not matter. Because quite frankly, they haven't done much in the past. So coming into this spring training, you were going to earn a spot. You were going to make your way onto the opening day roster. And both Sam Mull and Graham Ashcraft have reportedly showed up to camp out of shape. You know, we always talk about best shape of their lives alert. These guys showed up in not so good a shape. And then they have proceeded to in-game action look not so great on the velo. And that's really where we want to focus here. I'm not talking about ERA and all this other stuff in spring training. It's velo. Graham Ashcraft in his last outing was 1.8 miles per hour slower on average with his cut fastball than last year. He was also 2.4 miles per hour slower with his slider. And then Sam Mull, on the other hand, all four of his pitches are at least a mile an hour slower. His four-seam fastball, 2 miles an hour slower than last season. So everything is kind of feeding into this. Out of shape. Velo is down. They don't look ready. And as much as you and I have spent the offseason and really a lot of this spring training talking about how both of these guys are reasons to be bullish about this bullpen, Terry Francona's like, yeah, probably not on opening day.
Here's the thing with these two guys, Jeff, and in one of the cases, I just could not be more disappointed. And in the other case, I feel like this was a lovely parting gift from David Bell. In the case of Sam Mull, I suspect that he showed up just like he did last year. I suspect that Sam Mull just did what he always did because there were no repercussions. There was no accountability. David Bell wasn't going to do anything about it if he showed up 300 pounds. That was just the way it was going to be. With Graham Ashcraft, he is coming off of a bad injury-filled season, another disappointing year, and to have the nerve to roll into camp, not ready to go, not ready to bring it 110%, when you knew, because we knew, and everybody knows, that he was the odd man out of this rotation. He was the odd man out, and he was going to have to scratch and claw and fight his way into a spot on this team. To come into camp out of shape, to come into camp not ready to fight for that spot, that's unacceptable to me. Unacceptable.
100%. And to be honest with you, when I first heard this from the folks close to the team, I kind of pushed back. I'm like, oh, come on. I mean, it's spring training. They're ramping up. They're going to be there. They're going to get there. They're going to be ready to go. Sam Maul, I mean, if you remember the statistic that we talked about, the reliability thing, when it was appearances without a base runner and at least one strikeout, Sam Maul led the team last year in that category. And Graham Ashcraft looks like the kind of weapon of what TJ Antone was, where he could pitch multiple innings. He could be the fireman whenever you need him. He could be the guy to bridge the gap on a bad day for the starter. But if these guys showed up not ready, it does not matter. And I love the mentality that Terry Francona has with this. I don't care the name on the back of your jersey. I don't care what you did the last couple of years. If you're not ready to go, we don't want you on the opening day roster. We don't want you in the big leagues. And here's the other thing with this, Steve. Both these guys can go down to Louisville. They both have options. So this is a scenario where Terry Francona can say, you go into Louisville and you'll get right, and then we'll bring you up when you're right. They don't have to like force a square peg into a round hole and say, all right, well, you're not ready, but we can bring you along and stuff like that. Like, I kind of love that. And to be honest with you, I also believe that this is what's going on because they've already sent down Noelvi, Marte, and Will Benson. Two guys who, quite frankly, what they did last year may have fed into this. And I know that, Terry Francona has said it's not about what you did last year. It's about what you can do now. But it's clear that what they can do now is not going to help the team. And if they can't help the team, they shouldn't be on the Major League roster.
Well, definitely not right now. We're getting close, right? 10 days away. We're going to talk about that here coming up in a little bit. Now's time to be refining things, not figuring things out. Now's time to be making those last minute adjustments, getting that last minute comfort in, not trying to overhaul your whole game. And with the guys that they've sent out already, those are guys that need to overhaul their whole game. And quite frankly, I was really glad to see them send Will Benson out to minor league camp. That message needed to be sent really. And I told you last week, I was fearful that just out of the devil, that they might bring him to Cincinnati, depending on what happens with Spencer Steer. So I was glad to see them make this move. That being said, I agree. I think Terry Francona will send one or both of these guys to AAA if he doesn't think they're ready to go or the best option to take to Cincinnati for opening day. But what that does do, Jeff, is it creates some openings, creates some spots that we didn't think they were going to have. So now we need to talk about if you do send Graham Ashcraft, if you do send Sam Maul down and tell him, hey, boys, you better hit the gym and you better figure this out. Somebody else has to fill those spots. And there are a couple interesting options to fill at least one of those spots.
Yeah, the one guy that I'm really looking at, and this is something that we have heard from the folks close to the ball club, they said Joe La Sorsa. And to be honest with you, Steve, that was a guy that the Reds signed on a non-roster invite deal that I was like, cool, whatever. You need arms to fill spring training. This is great. But listen to this. On the converse of everything that it is with Ashcraft and Maul, out of shape, velo down, all this other stuff, Joe La Sorsa shows up ready to go. Super strong, and his velo is up. He's a sinker, slider, left-handed relief pitcher. His sinker is up on average 2.7 miles an hour per pitch, and his slider is up 1.9 miles an hour per pitch. Again, 26 years old. We're talking about a dude that they have team control of. If they add him to the 40-man roster, they can hang on to him for a bit. He's a guy that could be part of this bullpen for a while. And oh, by the way, they just got bad news on Alex Young, where he's going back to Cincinnati. They had sent Alex Young down to minor league camp, and he's going to Cincinnati to get his elbow tested out. All of that sounds really bad. So the fact that this guy is really showing up big in camp is huge for the team. If they're going to lose a lefty in Alex Young and they're going to be down a lefty, at least to start the season, in Sam Maul, you've got a guy like Joe La Sorsa that you can turn to. The other spot for me is a little bit interesting because I would just assume that was Carson Spire's spot, but Carson Spire's only pitched a couple of games this spring and I haven't seen him in a while. So I'm not sure where that one stands. That could be open for a guy like Ian Jabot.
It could be open for a guy like Ian Jabot. And also the last week waiver wire bonanza is about to happen. There might be a relief pitcher that they can pluck from a waiver wire to get 2-3 weeks worth of work out of until Graham Ashcraft and Sam Mull figure it out. And then that's a guy that you don't feel bad about cutting or trading for a player to be named later or flipping for cash or something. Like that's a spare part. I could see them going that route too. I don't think Carson Spires is pitched enough. I mean, is he going to be even for a bullpen usage? I don't think he's pitched enough to be used. As far as Alex Young goes, Joseph, you're reading my mind, because this trip back to Cincinnati is to rule out Tommy John or rule in. They're evaluating him for Tommy John surgery. So if that's the case, Alex Young,
that was not reported, but that's pretty much implied.
Right. He might be done at that point if that's the way it goes. So what was going to be a nice insurance policy in Alex Young is pretty much off the table, I think, heading into 2025. This I know, Jeff. These two guys need to get it together. Again, I really just can't hammer home the point enough that how disappointed I am that Graham Ashcraft didn't come in ready to just set the world on fire. This was a guy that had all of the opportunity to reinvent his game and be the flamethrower, be in the conversation for possibly closer 1B or closer A at some point along the way.
Right.
This is not a great start to that experiment.
And I think this is a case where, look, they've got time to do some stuff, but it seems like where there's smoke, there's fire. And I'm not ignoring what I have heard. And so what I definitely want to say is I'm not ruling them out of the opening day roster until I see it. But don't be surprised if Sam Mull and Graham Ashcraft are headed to Louisville to begin the season. Do you know, Steve, there are 2 reasons why Spencer Steer may not hit the IL like we thought he would to begin the season. We'll tell you why coming up next. Have you said to yourself, man, I need to cut out the snacking? Well, maybe you just need to snack right, just like I do. Get yourself some wonderful pistachios. They've got all of these amazing flavors. This one's chili roasted, but they've got like salt and vinegar. They got this awesome lime jalapeno that looked fantastic. That's probably going to be in my next bag whenever I get to replenishing this one. But they are packed with everything you need. They've got so much protein. They've got all the 9 amino acids that you can look for. And when you get these pre-shelled ones, you can literally just grab a handful and go. So tasty, so good. Replace the chips, replace the pretzels. Get yourself some wonderful pistachios today, because you just got to get snacking and get cracking, and head on over to wonderfulpistachios.com, because they're going to learn all about them pistachios that pack the protein punch. Go get yourself some wonderful pistachios today. Can't recommend them enough.
Of course. You're muted because you're drinking Guinness. And
I didn't want to get the little sloshy on there. Anyway, washing it down after a nice pistachio. Become an everydayer. Subscribe. We love our everydayers out there. Appreciate you all jumping in. If you're in the comments section, hello, welcome in. And if you're not an everydayer, do so by subscribing today. All right, Steve, we got some good news, at least tentatively good news, about Spencer Steer. Reports are that he will begin a throwing program on Tuesday, and he has been swinging the bat as part of some drills and some live batting practice and stuff like that. Hasn't gotten yet into a game since February, so it's been a little bit, but we might see him miss the injured list, and Terry Francona actually gave us a couple of reasons as to why.
Yeah, the biggest reason is a sad reason. It's a disappointing reason for other reasons, but the primary reason that Spencer Steer could find himself on the roster opening day is the fact that Tyler Stevenson is going to find himself on the injured list opening day. That's going to create a spot where Spencer Steer could be on the active roster and just be the straight DH while he continues to work out that shoulder. 9 days from when he starts his throwing program, I don't think is quite enough to get him ready to be in the field on opening day, but a week or so into the season, he could be ready to go defensively. Right. So having him on the roster, having him DH for a week or two while you wait for Tyler Stevenson to get back, while you wait for Spencer to continue to strengthen up that shoulder, I think allows Spencer Steer to contribute his bat to the lineup. It allows Spencer Steer to avoid the IL. He's never been on the injured list thus far in his very short career. Let's keep it that way. Let's keep Spencer Steer in this lineup, and let's keep that bat in the lineup.
Yeah, Terry Francona will not rule him out yet. He actually had a great quote. He said, let's let him do his thing because he's really getting after it, like really getting after it. I think he deserves the respect of having every chance possible. And if it's not the right thing, we're not going to do it. So I think that Terry Francona just continues to leave all avenues open when it comes to Spencer Steer, what's best for him, what's best for the team. But I tend to agree with you, especially on the DH spot, because thinking about who could hit in that spot if he is not here and who has to be on the roster if he is not here, this kind of weakens the roster without him. I mean, the lineup is just not as good without Spencer Steer in it, albeit we talked about they could at least weather the storm a bit with the guys who are healthy on this team now, as opposed to last year when he was really looked at to be that second part of the 1-2 punch with Ellie De La Cruz, and he never really became that. I think that we are talking about a much different set of expectations for him now, and a guy that can just be the mashed potatoes like we talked about last season. You know, I mean, do you remember when I called him the mashed potato? I remember you really liked that metaphor that I came up with there. But no, I think that this is a good thing. I think this is good. And hey, the good news is Terry Francona, and they asked him, he was pressed by reporters, you know, how many plate appearances in spring training do you think he needs? And Francona suggested a total of like 40 to 60 plate appearances would be good for a guy to be ready for the regular season. I don't necessarily know if he can get that from now till the end of spring training, but if you put it all together, I think he'll be close to that. I think there's a really good chance that he does miss the IL now.
Yeah, and I know we were saving the comments and the questions for a little bit later. I do want to grab this one, though, Jeff, from Zero Wave. If Steer is healthy, is he a candidate for the cleanup hitter? I heard Terry Francona talking to Tom Brenneman, and Terry has basically laid out what 1 through 4 looks like already. It's going to be TJ Friedel, it's going to be Matt McClain, it's going to be Ellie De La Cruz, it's going to be Austin Hayes. That's your 1 through 4.
Who predicted him?
Yeah, I know. Stop it.
Who predicted him?
Nobody cares, Mr. Guinness sweater. Nobody cares. And then after that, you've got some opportunity. I think Spencer Steer at DH in the 5 spot is a perfect place for him to begin the season and just go in there and swing the lumber and work on that shoulder to get back in the field. I think that's a perfect 1 through 5. And then you can tinker with the rest of the lineup depending on who's in, as far as Fraley, Fairchild kind of things go, as far as where Jamer Candelario is playing or what you're doing with the rest of the lineup. Where CES is, if he's in the lineup that day, that's a pretty good lineup. And you could scoot Steer down another spot, put CES 5th, Spencer Steer 6th. That's a great 1 through 6. I'll take that 1 through 6 every day.
The one thing, and I trust Terry Francona, we're still in the honeymoon phase here. So, you know, I'm falling on a grenade, catching the grenade, whatever it is, whenever it comes to Terry Francona. But he said something that I found a little bit interesting. He was asked if Tyler Stevenson does affect this. And kind of like we said about the DH thing, I think that that's all right. But Francona said the way I would answer that is that without Stevenson available early, that definitely can play into the roster construction at the beginning of the season for sure. And I stopped short of saying that I 100% agree with this. Obviously, Terry Francona runs the team. I don't, but I worry a little bit because if the shoulder is a thing that's going to continue to be a nagging injury for him all season long, I would lean more on the conservative side and say, look, whether Stevenson's here or not, we got to do what's right for Spencer Steer. Now, I'm not saying that that is exactly what Terry Francona was arguing against, but I definitely don't want there to be this feeling as though the Reds have to push somebody who isn't as hurt because they're missing other players. I feel like that's where they got into trouble a lot last year, and that's why they're still dealing with it now with Spencer Steer.
Well, that's why Spencer Steer's shoulder is still hurt, right? Yeah. He played through it. He pushed through it. He kept going. So, you know, if the doctors, God help us with this medical staff, if the doctors think that he can be DH and not do more damage to the shoulder and not impact his ability to rehab it, okay. If they don't think that, then you're right. He shouldn't be the DH. Stevenson and Steer should start on the IL. And then we're talking about maybe bringing Mr. Outside Hire in, which interestingly enough, we're going to do coming up here shortly, Jeff.
Right, because there is a good chance that Spencer Steer might not hit the injured list. But hey, the Reds could avoid all of this awkwardness in the first place with Spencer Steer and his health and all this other stuff and go sign a DH. They probably could do that. There is a thought that they could add some lineup help between now and opening day. We'll discuss who and why and how coming up next.
Ever check your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you a full visibility and control over your finances each and every day. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, your investments, and spending in one place, so you can stop just managing your money and you can start building wealth. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch Money to check your finances, track spending, and even plan long-term goals. Managing money with your partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without all of the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONMLB at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONMLB for half off your first year. If you can't catch us live here on YouTube, and see how that works, Jeff, when you come out of the break without your mute button on, you can follow us on all of the audio platforms, folks. We are on every single one of the audio podcasting feeds. Click that subscribe button. Take us to the gym. Take us in the car. Take us on the road with you. We love talking Reds baseball with you, and we don't want you to miss a single episode of Reds content. All right, Jeff, we teased it. We set it up. There was a blurb. There was a drop-in a piece recently that was wild speculation, but interesting wild speculation. JD Martinez to the Cincinnati Reds as a designated hitter.
Yes, and I would like to highlight how you said that. Speculation. It's a bit of a blur, a bit of a drop-in, because Zachary Reimer from Bleacher Report wrote an article about the remaining free agents that are out there and where they could end up. And he was talking about JD Martinez and how he could fit in for the New York Yankees without Giancarlo Stanton. And he said, and this was like 2 lines, it was in italics. And this is what Zachary Reimer said. He said, bold prediction, JD Martinez lands in Cincinnati. And then Reds Twitter did what it does when it comes to anything that sounds like a rumor. And they went crazy with it. And they're like, JD Martinez, oh my gosh, this lineup would be so good with him. And you know what, Steve? It would. But you also know what, Steve? The Reds aren't talking to JD Martinez right now. So there's a problem with this. We're going to talk about why it works, and we're going to talk about why it's not actually happening right now, as much as it stinks to say.
You know, when stuff like this comes out, Jeff, I wish that when it got posted on Twitter, there was an audio track underneath it where you just hear the voice going, and they're off, because that's what happens with the Reds Twitter. It's like when things like this post.
What would we do without Twitter?
Listen, this is not a terrible idea. You look at Spot Track's numbers for him, $9 to $10 million. You're getting a guy that's a proven veteran leader, a proven hitter. Don't expect him to even help pick up the balls during batting practice. He can't even field those. It's his age 37 season. He's going to be here just to hit. That's all you could expect from him. Now, do I think the Reds could afford that? Could they afford $10 million, 37-year-old DH? I think they could afford it. I'd be interested to hear the reaction when Nick Kroll walks into Bob and Phil's offices and says, hey, listen, here's what I want to do. Bob looking around going, are you trying to punk me right now? Or are we on one of those shows? Listen, he's 37-year-old DH. Do you want me to go do it? I'll go do it for free. I can hear Bob saying all those things. So I don't know that the front office would authorize this, but it makes sense a little bit, Jeff. It makes sense. And you could flip him later, especially if he's doing pretty well. When you get everybody back and healthy, you would have an overabundance of bats and maybe be able to move a guy for that extra relief pitcher you might need down the road, or that extra thing that hasn't quite gone your way. I like this for a lot of reasons if it could somehow materialize.
Well, and one of the first things that anybody would say is, well, 2024 wasn't that great for JD Martinez. He hit 235 and he has 726 OPS, but the peripherals loved him. He barreled the ball a lot. He had a lot of good contact. His average exit velocity was really close to Ellie's. It was at 91 miles an hour. So yeah, he was 36, now he's 37, but his quality of contract statistics are all good. It's not as if he was a light hitting dude. He was just getting unlucky with what he was doing. and he still has a pretty decent walk rate as well. I think you put him in this lineup, you could probably pencil in, depending on how much playing time he gets, considering the possibility of him being the DH every day, or 5 out of 6 or 5 out of 7, whatever it is. You could maybe pencil him in for 30 home runs at Great American Ballpark. He did that with the Dodgers in 2023. He hit 33 home runs in Los Angeles. So it's not as if we're talking about a guy who is in the twilight of his career, barely hanging on. He can still hit. The issue is the lack of versatility. The Reds got rid of Jonathan India because he had a lack of versatility in him. And as much as the Royals are about to play him in the outfield and do what the Reds talked about doing last year, well, it remains to be seen if that'll work. JD Martinez, on the other hand, we know it doesn't work. The last time he played in the field, he was playing in Boston. And if you just go look up JD Martinez in the field, there's some pretty hilarious gaffes that he made in the outfield. So the Reds aren't going to do that. It will just be as a DH, but it opens up the possibility of especially a healthy Spencer Steer playing in the field. You can move CES to third base sometimes. You can move Spencer Steer to third base sometimes. You can move Spencer Steer to the outfield. Could he possibly upgrade the Freychild platoon in right field? There's lots of scenarios where the lineup could get better. And then you also add in the possibility, albeit hypothetical, that you don't have to pay him $10 million. You could pay him $5 or $6 million or something like that. I don't know. The whole thing of it is, though, this is just folks like us talking about the possibility of JD Martinez being a Cincinnati Red. This is not reports of Nick Kroll calling JD Martinez agent. That's not what's happened here.
Yeah, you can definitely file this in the don't hold your breath category. I think that's where we're at. But JD Martinez at the little ballpark on Joe Nuxall Way. Oh, that ball could be a flying. That would be fun to watch. We'll keep an eye on this, folks, but I don't expect much to come from this. But I do know that as of right now, this second, we are live and 10 days away from opening day. And we're going to talk briefly now, Jeff, about the greatest Red to wear the number 10. And this is going to be an interesting conversation because there's a guy on the team right now that wore number 10, and that is Terry Francona. Terry Francona wore number 10 for the Reds. I always refer to this as Eddie Taubensee days away from opening day. But let's face it, this number is retired, and this number is retired for a guy that didn't play a single inning on the field for the Reds, but was one of the all-time greats to wear a number 10 and do some things. That's Sparky Anderson. So we're Sparky Anderson days away from opening day. Versus Eddie Taubensee or Terry Francona or any of the others. Look, I love that number 10 is retired for Sparky. I love that, he was able to come into Cincinnati and manage the Big Red machine and do it in a way where the players respected him, but he also acknowledged how many superstars he was dealing with. He's on record as saying all I had to do was write down the names and get out of the way. Basically, that right. was Sparky's manager style as far as those superstar ego position players go. And then, of course, at the same time, earning the moniker Captain Hook. And going out there and not suffering any of these pitchers. I would have loved to seen how Sparky Anderson would have managed some of these prima donnas today, sir, because I'm going to tell you what, I think he would have had guys break down crying on the mound if he was around today. Some of the stuff that goes on in baseball right now would not have been tolerated.
He strikes me, like, looking back on some of the things that he had to do, and like you said, the quotes that he had, he strikes me as that manager that, working at the company or whatever, he spends a lot of time over in this one department because he knows this one department is a very disgruntled group of people or a very rambunctious group of people, and he's got to keep them all in line. And every so often he ventures over here, the lineup area, and he's like, yeah, you guys are doing great. You guys just keep doing what you're doing. You guys have fun. I'm going to go back over here and get these guys in line. And that's what he did. And I think that obviously it's Sparky Anderson days away, but I also like to put this argument out there for Reds fans of a certain historical persuasion. Frank McCormick was a really good Cincinnati Red. In 10 years, he had 27 WAR. He was a pretty good player. Now, the game was very different back then. You're talking about pitchers throwing a lot more innings and really a different style of pitching. You didn't really have cut fastballs, and breaking balls were not as common and things like that. So you're definitely talking about a different game because he played in the late 30s, early 40s, but he was part of a World Series team. So there's definitely a little bit of that. And then also you could talk about the other, sorry. Yeah.
Speaking of a number 10 that was part of a World Series team, no number 10 review would be complete without asking ourselves the question, where's Quinones? That's what we need to know. Where's Quinones? Luis Quinones, number 10 for the Cincinnati Reds, 1990 wire-to-wire World Series championship team. So he definitely gets an honorable mention. This is a fun number. I love getting to talk about Sparky. I love that Tito wore this number when he was a player here. I love it all the way around how that symmetry is. Now the current manager used to wear 10. The 10's retired for one of the all-time great managers in the franchise. I just love how it all comes around full circle, Jeff. And that is where we're going to end it for today. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Reds. Thanks as always for making us your first listen. Keep us tuned in. Your feeds will be going all through Goodyear to gather up all the news, the information, and report right back here because keep you locked on Reds every single day.